problem, and then she was given psychiatric drugs. It didn't really go anywhere. Then she was given electric shock treatment in Canada. That didn't work. And then she went back onto some other psychiatric drugs, and I believe it was antidepressants, which didn't seem to do it. And then in September 1999, she undertook a lobotomy in Cardiff under the neurosurgeon called Brian Simpson, and then she died 4 weeks later.
Brian, you'll give me one example, which obviously I can't comment on because it's just one particular case study which I'm not au fait with. But certainly from my experience, I have never ever come across someone who's been lobotomized. It's just not done anymore because there's no clinical indication for it. We have pharmaceutical advances and psychotherapeutic advances, which means that it's not needed anymore.
And these are the I mean, I take your point, Max, but the psychotherapeutic advances, let's take psychiatric drugs. I mean, internationally, since 2002, there's been international studies and psychiatric drug warnings that now total 52. In 2002, it was 3. There is a great awareness of the fact that these psychopharmaceutical products are not all they're made out to be.
Right,
and the fact is, let me just finish on that, because there's the side effects such as aggression, violence, hallucinations, and even suicidal ideation, those things which they are prescribed for and which they're purporting to actually treat.
So
Brian,
are you saying that,
sorry, Ellen, go on.
So are you saying that the reason why you're keeping psychiatrists away from trauma victims at 7/7 at 9/11 is because you're afraid they're going to be lobotomized and given dangerous drugs? Is that why you're keeping them away?
That's a little bit eccentric, I think.
Well, you raised them first, with respect, but anyway.
No. And as I said before, Julian, that is not, wherever that report came from, it is a false report. It is incorrect. That is not why the volunteer ministers go to...
Every single person in that meeting agreed that they were there to keep psychiatrists away. This was not just one rogue member of the Church of Scientology. That this was the entire meeting.
No,
they said they needed to rescue trauma victims from the clutches of psychiatrists.
Were you the one that was there in the meeting?
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay. Well, from the conversations that I've had with other production staff at the BBC here in preparations for this show, one thing that I can say is that either, your understanding was completely incorrect, or the communication that was given completely confused individuals as to what the CCHR
Janet,
actually is.
I had not heard the tape prior to now, but I heard people genuinely celebrating the idea of keeping the psychs away. It was as clear as night follows day.
Well, okay. I mean, as I said, Julia, unfortunately, we haven't been privy to listening to that particular tape, so it's really hard to comment.
All right.
But
can I put another point to you, which I think
Sure.
is quite important here, because it gets into the sort of the kernel of why this discussion is happening. Do you both believe that mental illness does not exist?
Well, let me come to that. Now, when you consider what it is that psychiatric patients, those people who are receiving the so-called treatments, are being told. Let's take the prevailing psychiatric theory, or one of them, and that is the chemical imbalance of the brain. That's what parents of young children are being told. That's what adults are being told. Yet there's no empirical scientific evidence, there's no tests to actually show that a chemical imbalance actually exists.
All right, what do you say? What do you say causes it?
What I would say,
what do you say causes it?
Let me just go on to that bit,
that,
because the other thing is that if a chemical imbalance, you can't prove it. The other thing to point out is that what does a correct chemical balance look like? Even that you can't actually say.
But you still haven't answered the what do you think causes it? If you've got people who are clearly unstable for whatever reason, what is causing it? If it isn't what the scientists are alluding to.
Well, I think one of the confusions, first of all, Julian, is to say that there actually is a science behind the diagnosis. If individuals wish to go to the CCHR website, cchr.org.uk, there is a video of interviews that were done of psychiatrists at the APA convention in Toronto in May 2006, where each one of the individuals say there are no tests to back up the diagnosis. And when asked about cures, each one of them said that they hadn't cured any patients.
But have you?
I think that the living...
But have you?
That's not the point, or that's not the question. The thing that people have to understand...
It's a pretty good question if you happen to be suffering at the time.
Yes, I understand. But, one needs to actually take a look at
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is if you end up in a situation telling people that you have a way of guiding them through a difficulty, but you can't tell us what that is, what hope does that offer them? They're just joining you in an act of blind faith.
Well, one thing on that, Julian, is that what people don't know, what's not generally known, is that undiagnosed physical conditions, and Max can probably confirm this, and that is that undiagnosed physical conditions can manifest as mental illness symptoms.
Well, absolutely, but that's the role of the doctor, is to work out if it's a physical cause, if it's a psychiatric cause, or, you know...
But you're a doctor, Max.
I know, well, that's the role of the doctor, is to work that out. That's why we did 6 years at medical school and then countless years specialising, is so I can sit there and say, this person is confused, do they have a raised urea and creatinine, or do they actually have a psychosis? Like that. That's what being a doctor is.
Well, let's take, for example, psychosis. What is there, for example, what is the physical condition that may manifest as psychosis? I'm a layperson.
Well, for example, if you have cancer and you have a high... I mean, I don't really want to get into the specifics here because I think
it'd be interesting, though.
But if, for example, you have cancer, you have raised calcium levels, that can actually make can create lots of symptoms which would mimic what we classify as psychosis.
What about psychosis, though?
I think the thing you have to realise here is that all of medicine is about arbitrary lines being drawn between certain symptoms. So there's certain symptoms that are included, and that makes a diagnosis. Certain symptoms that are excluded, and that stops the diagnosis.
But let's take psychosis. You raised that particular condition.
I mean, how would you suggest
let me
treating
just finish
psychosis?
that, because what I have found, and this is from doctors, is that a vitamin B12 deficiency.
So is that how you would
No,
treat psychosis with vitamin B12? Is
no,
that what you're saying?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that that's what a doctor said, that psychosis can be as a result of a vitamin B12 deficiency.
Yes, Korsakoff psychosis.
Right.
That's a recognised diagnosis for people who are alcoholics and haven't had enough B12.
Can I deal with the issue that we started with, namely the idea of people being at the scene of major disasters? We have been and talked about events in New York in 2001 and here in London last year. We also heard people talking about the treatment of those who suffered in the tsunami in India and Sri Lanka and other places. Are you saying that in the future you will not go to those sort of events and seek to do the sort of work that you have been alluding to thus far?
Julian, no one has said any such thing.
Why will you go then? Why have you gone?
We've gone to do the work that we do, which is part of the disaster relief team from the volunteer ministers. There's over 60,000 volunteer ministers around the world who are ready to respond to disasters whenever they happen.
Okay,
Janet,
I just want to bring Ian Howarth in as well.
You're talking about the work that you do, but the work that you do has been seen over the last few decades to be creating difficulties in many parts of the world. Again, you have a criminal record, not you personally, but Scientology in Canada. Judge Leahy in the early 80s, a High Court judge in the UK, described Scientology as corrupt, sinister and dangerous. So why should we listen to anything that Scientology is saying? Why should we trust anything that you're coming out with? I would suggest that even describing yourself as a religion in these environments where tragedies have occurred is perhaps an insult to the religious community, who would want to respond with love and compassion. We don't see that coming from Scientology.
Well, Ian, we have to stop meeting in front of microphones like this.
We've met face to face, and I've invited you to meet with me personally, and you've not taken me up on that.
Well, that's because you don't actually publish your address, Ian. But let me just say this. I'm sure that you were going to get around to also telling the audience about your own convictions, which have resulted from the kidnapping and deprogramming that you were involved in Canada.
This is an absolute lie. You are smearing me on national radio.
Well, Ian, are you going to deny that you have a conviction yourself, that you left Canada?
Of course I am going to deny that I have a conviction. I do not have a conviction. This is another bit of your propaganda to smear me, and it's not helpful.
Well, it's not part of the propaganda. It actually exists, and they were trying to execute judgment in this particular country on that prosecution.
Well, it's been denied,
conveniently
and you
declared
heard the
bankruptcy at
denials.
that. All right, so that's fine.
I'm going to have to butt in at this point because you can hear the music playing, which I'm afraid